They said the mountain was dangerous after the rains. But for Lena, danger wasn't a choice, it was her daily companion. The loose gravel paths, the cracked wooden bridge, the cold wind that cut through her threadbare shawl. She knew them all like an old, cruel friend. That morning, she'd only climbed halfway up the trail, basket in hand, searching for wild herbs to sell at the village market, when she saw something that froze her blood. A man, face down, half buried in the mud at the foot of a landslide. For a second, she just stared. He wasn't moving, and then her instincts took over. She dropped her basket and ran, slipping on the wet stone, her hands scraping against jagged rock as she reached him. His shirt was torn, soaked in blood and rainwater. A deep gash ran across his forehead. There was no one else around, no phone signal this high up, no help coming. Lena knelt beside him and shook his shoulder. "Sir." "Hey, can you hear me?" "No." Response. His skin was pale, lips turning blue from the cold. She didn't hesitate. She hoisted one of his arms over her shoulder and dragged him inch by inch toward the small cabin her father had left behind. It had no running water, no electricity, but it had a roof, and right now that was all she could give. By the time she got him inside, her legs were trembling from exhaustion. She laid him on the dusty old cot, lit a fire, and boiled the last of her water. She cleaned his wounds with a cloth torn from her own dress. She crushed herbs with trembling fingers and pressed the paste against the gash on his head. Still. He didn't wake, but he was breathing. She sat by the fire, watching the rise and fall of his chest like it was the only thing holding her together. She didn't sleep that night, not really, just dozed in and out, startled every time he shifted. Or groaned in his sleep. He murmured once, something she couldn't make out, a name. A warning? She leaned closer but caught only the sound of rain tapping against the windows. In the flickering light, she noticed his watch. It gleamed unnaturally, something out of place in her world of rust and soot, gold with diamonds along the edge. The kind of thing she'd only seen in magazines discarded at the bus stop. She whispered to herself, "Who are you?" No ID, no wallet, no clue, just a man with blood on his hands and a fortune on his wrist. The next morning, Lena woke up to silence. The fire had gone out. Her legs were stiff. Her back ached. She turned toward the cot. Empty. The blanket she had wrapped him in lay folded at the edge. The door was ajar. He was gone. She stepped outside, scanning the trail, but the mist was thick and low. No footprints, no thank you. Just an empty cabin and a hollow in her chest she couldn't explain. Maybe he thought she wanted something. Maybe he didn't trust her. Maybe he just didn't remember. She cleaned up the room quietly, putting everything back in its place. The herbs, the bowl, the bloodied cloth. She never told anyone in the village what happened. Who would believe her anyway? A man like that doesn't just fall from the sky into a mountain girl's arms. Still. She kept the watch, not the real one, just the memory of it, because for the first time in years, someone had needed her, not her to cook, or clean, or sell wildflowers by the roadside, but her care, her warmth, her heart, and even if he never came back, she would remember the night she saved a man whose name she didn't even know. A man who, without saying a word, would change her life forever. The morning he disappeared, Lena stood frozen at the cabin door, staring into the thick mountain mist like it would hand her an answer. But there was nothing. No sound of footsteps, no trail in the mud, just cold, empty silence. It was as if he'd been a ghost, one that bled, one that breathed and then vanished into the mountain like a secret swallowed by fog. She stepped outside barefoot, arms wrapped tight around her body. The firewood she'd stacked was untouched. His boots were gone. So were the bandages she'd used. The cot was neatly made, like he'd taken extra care not to leave a trace behind. No note. No thank you. Not even a name. She waited until mid-morning, hoping he'd come back. Maybe he'd gone to find help. Maybe he'd return with a doctor. But the minutes dragged in 2 hours, and all she heard was the wind rustling through pine branches and the distant cry of a bird overhead. By afternoon, she gave up waiting. She cleaned the cabin in silence, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't carried a stranger's weight on her back, like she hadn't spent the night keeping him alive with nothing but boiled herbs and prayers. In her village, people didn't talk about miracles. They didn't believe in fate. They believed in work, in routine, in keeping your head down and your business quiet. So Lena said nothing, not to her neighbor at the water pump, not to the old man who bought her wild roots, not even to her cousin Mira, who noticed the cuts on her arms and asked, "Did you fall again?" Lena just nodded and smiled like always. But something had changed inside her. For the first time in a long time, she'd felt like she mattered, like she'd done something that counted, not for money, not for food, but because it was right. And even though she didn't know his name, that man now lived in the back of her mind like a shadow until 3 days later. That's when the black SUVs rolled into the village. They didn't belong, the tires crushed. Gravel like bones. The engines purred too quietly. The glass was tinted, the kind you couldn't see through. The kind you only saw in movies or trouble. Lena was at the far end of the market, trading dried mushrooms for a tin of rice when she heard the first whisper. "Did you see the cars?" City men, looking for someone. She turned too. Look, two tall men in pressed suits stepped out. Sunglasses, earpieces, polished shoes that didn't belong anywhere near mud. They walked straight up to the butcher's stall, flashed some kind of photo, then handed over a stack of money so thick it made Lena's heart clench. People started talking low, suspicious murmurs. They asked about someone who was hurt, there. Paying just to ask questions. What kind of man are they looking for? Lena's palms went cold. She backed away from the stall, slowly, carefully, her tin of rice forgotten. Her instinct screamed louder than her thoughts. Don't get involved. Hide. She turned down a side path behind the school building and ducked behind the crumbling stone wall. Her breath came shallow. Her fingers trembled. Why were they here? Why? Now. She hadn't told a soul about what happened, but someone must have seen her. Maybe a shepherd, maybe someone who passed by the trail and kept quiet until money came into the picture. She peeked around the edge of the wall. The men were now speaking to the cloth seller. He looked confused, but he took the cash and pointed toward the woods, toward her side of the village. Her throat tightened. She ran, not out of guilt, not out of fear of what she did because what she did was good, but she knew how this world worked. Poor girls didn't get visitors in black cars. Poor girls didn't get involved with rich men unless someone got hurt or blamed. She made it to her home, bolted the door, and sat on the floor, heart pounding like it was trying to warn her of something she couldn't yet see. Maybe they thought she hurt him. Maybe they wanted something. Maybe just maybe he sent them. That thought unsettled her even more. Why would a man like him want anything from a girl like her? She sat there until the sun disappeared behind the trees. The men didn't knock. The cars didn't return. By morning, the village was back to its usual rhythm, as if it had all been a strange dream, but Lena knew better. Her world had shifted. Someone was looking for her, and whatever came next, she wasn't ready. It started with a knock on the door, not loud, just firm, like whoever was behind it knew exactly what they were doing and exactly who they were looking for. Lena froze. It was early, too early for visitors. The sun hadn't cleared the trees yet, and the village was still quiet, wrapped in morning mist. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days, hadn't dared go to the market. She thought maybe the strangers in suits had given up, maybe they'd moved on. But now, someone stood on the other side of her door, and she knew deep in her chest that whoever it was, her life wouldn't be the same after she opened it. She pulled the door open slowly. A man stood there. Not one of the ones from before. He looked younger, early 30s, maybe, sharp black coat, silver tie, polished shoes dusted with mud. His hair was perfectly in place, but his eyes scanned her like he already knew everything. "Miss Lena?" he said. His voice was clipped, practiced, polite. She nodded slowly, unsure. "I've been instructed to escort you to the Severn Inn. There's someone who wishes to speak with you privately." She blinked. "The inn?" "Yes. The car is waiting." Lena stepped back. "I think you have the wrong person." He didn't move. "We don't make mistakes, Miss Lena." Something about the way he said that made her heart twist. She looked past him and saw it a sleek, dark car parked just beyond the trees. The same kind of tinted glass, quiet engine, like it had no business being anywhere near a place like this. The man didn't press her, just stood there, waiting, like time didn't exist for him. And somehow, Lena stepped outside. She didn't know why. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was fear, maybe It was the gnawing, impossible hope that this had anything to do with the man she had saved. The ride to the inn was silent. The man didn't speak, just drove through winding mountain roads with eerie confidence, like he'd memorized every curve. Lena sat stiff in the back seat, her hands clasped in her lap. Her village disappeared behind the trees. The Severn Inn was the only place in town with polished glass doors and marble counters. She'd only seen it once, from afar, while walking to the bus stop. It was where city people stayed. People with phones, credit cards, clean shoes. As she stepped inside, the scent of citrus and wood polish hit her like a wall. She didn't belong here, not with her mud-stained skirt and trembling hands. The assistant led her through the lobby. Without a word, then stopped at a door near the back. He turned to her and said, "He's inside. He asked to speak to you alone." Lena hesitated, her fingers brushing the wooden door handle. Her throat was dry. She pushed it open. The room was quiet, bright with morning light streaming in through the tall windows. A man stood facing away from her, staring out at the hills. She recognized the shape of him before she saw his face. It was him, the man from the mountain. He turned slowly. His face was clean-shaven now. No bruises, no blood. His eyes were clearer, sharp, aware, and full of something she couldn't quite name. "Hello, Lena," he said. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I figured it was time I introduced myself," he continued. "I'm Daniel Roth." She blinked. The name meant nothing to her at first, but he watched her face closely, and when her eyes didn't light up in recognition, he almost looked relieved. "I'm told I disappear from headlines often enough," he added, with a half-smile. "Which is the point. What is this?" she finally whispered. "Why are you here?" Daniel stepped closer. "You saved my life. You had no idea who I was. You had no reason to help me. And yet—" "You did?" Lena stared. "I didn't do it for anything. I didn't even think you'd remember me." He nodded. "I remember everything. I remember waking up to the scent of firewood, the pain in my ribs, the way you talked to me even when I couldn't answer. I remember your hands shaking as you wrapped the bandage." Lena looked away, suddenly overwhelmed. "I disappeared," he said softly, "because I had to. There are people in my world who use weakness as a weapon. A missing day, a rumor of collapse. It can cost billions. But in those hours you stayed with me. I wasn't a billionaire. I wasn't a CEO. I was just a man who needed help." She swallowed hard. "Why find me now?" "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, about what you did, about what it meant." There was a silence between them, heavy, unsure. Then Daniel said, "But not everyone is happy I found you." She looked up. He nodded. "There are people who believe your kindness was calculated, that you knew that you were waiting for a reward. I've had investigators try to dig through your life, your past, your neighbors. It's invasive and unfair." Lena shook her head slowly. "I don't want anything from you." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, her father's old scarf. "You left this behind," he said. "That night, in the cabin." She reached for it slowly, hands trembling. "Lena," he said softly, "you didn't just save a life, you reminded someone who had everything. What actually matters." And then, just before she could respond, the door opened. A woman in a business suit walked in, heels clicking sharply on the floor. Her eyes landed on Lena like she was dirt on polished shoes. "Mr. Roth," she said, tight-lipped, "your board meeting begins in 15. Daniel didn't turn. "I'll be there," he said. "Close the door, please." The woman gave Lena one last look, a look that screamed, "You don't belong here." Then she left, and Lena? She clutched the scarf against her chest, unsure whether she wanted to run out the door or stay and find out where this impossible moment was taking her. Next. The city wasn't what she imagined. It didn't sparkle like the movies or feel magical like those rare posters that hung in shop windows back home. It was fast, loud, cold in a different kind of way, the kind that didn't come from the wind, but from the people. Lena sat in the back of a sleek black car, staring wide-eyed at towers of glass and steel that reached into a sky she barely recognized. Everything moved too fast here. People walked with purpose, phones glued to ears, eyes never meeting hers. When she reached Daniel's building, no, his tower, she felt like she was walking into another planet. The lobby alone looked like something from a dream: marble floors, golden elevators, a chandelier that probably cost more than her entire village. And yet, every step she took inside made her smaller. She wore her best dress, the one she'd mended 3 times. It still hung awkwardly on her shoulders. Her shoes squeaked against the floor. Everyone who passed looked her up and down, subtle but sharp like invisible blades. The receptionist gave her a tight smile, then whispered something into a hidden earpiece. Moments later, Daniel's assistant appeared, the same man with the silver tie. But this time his tone wasn't just polite. It was clipped, controlled, like she was a task, a disruption. "Follow me, Miss Lena," he said, not waiting for her to reply. She followed him through long hallways of frosted glass and whispered meetings, past rooms filled with people in tailored suits, laughing at things that had nothing to do with survival. She caught their eyes as she walked by. They didn't smile. They stared, like she was some mistake the building had let slip in. Finally, she was led into a private lounge, and Daniel was already there, standing near a wide window with a view that stretched across the entire skyline. He smiled when he saw her, and for a moment her heart steadied. His presence had that effect, like the noise of the world quieted when he looked her way. "Lena," he said, stepping forward. "You came." She nodded, unsure whether she should sit, speak, or just stand there. He noticed and gently motioned to the velvet chair across from him. "I wanted you to see what I see," he said, "the life I live, and I wanted to say thank you." Properly, he reached for a box on the side table, polished black with gold trim. He opened it carefully and turned it toward her. A necklace, no a fortune. Gold, delicate, with a single sapphire that caught the light and scattered it like fire. She didn't touch it. "I can't," she whispered. Daniel looked confused. "Why not?" Her voice trembled. "Because that's not what this was. I didn't do it for this. I didn't save you because I wanted something. I know that," he said softly, "but this is just a gesture, a beginning." Before she could reply, the door behind her opened again. 2 people entered without knocking. A woman tall, dressed in white silk and red lipstick, and a man who looked like he belonged in the front row of every business magazine. They paused when they saw her. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "So this is her," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Elena, not now." But Elena stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Daniel's former. We still work together, sort of." She looked Lena up and down slowly. "You must be special." Lena didn't know what to say, so she just nodded, her fingers curling into her dress. The man beside her chuckled. "You brought her here? Into this building?" He turned to Daniel. "Come on, man, it's a nice story, sure, but this is reckless." Daniel's voice was firm now. "She's my guest." But the woman stepped closer, lowering her voice, as if confiding. "It's sweet that you're trying to be noble, Daniel. But let's be honest, what are you going to do? Invite her to board meetings? Take her to gala dinners? You've built a world too high for people like her to breathe in." Lena stood. She had heard enough. "I should go," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel took a step forward. "Lena, wait." She turned to him, eyes stinging. "You wanted me to see your world, and now I have every glance, every whisper, every look that says I don't belong, and they're right." She swallowed hard. I never will." He looked stunned, like he hadn't expected her to crumble, but she wasn't crumbling. She was choosing. "You offered me a necklace," she continued, voice shaking. "But sure, but you never once asked me what I wanted. You assumed I wanted to be part of this, that this would fix something, but I didn't save you to be saved. I didn't want your money. I wanted to matter, for once, just to matter." The room was dead silent. She took one last look at him, Daniel Roth, the man who once lay broken in a cabin, far away from this cruel city, and then she walked past the assistant, past the cold stairs, through the golden elevators and the polished floors, and out into the street. No one stopped her. The wind outside hit her face sharp and fast, but it was honest. And after everything she had just felt inside those walls, honest was a kind of warmth. She didn't know where she was going, only that she was walking away from something that glittered but had no soul. Maybe he'd follow, maybe he wouldn't. But Lena had made peace with one truth. She didn't need to belong to his world. She only needed to belong to herself. The snow came early that year, blanketing the mountain trail in a soft, aching silence that made everything feel like a memory. Lena stood near the edge of the path, her basket half full of winter herbs, her breath curling into the cold morning air. She had returned to the rhythm of her old life, not because it was easy but because it was familiar, and it asked nothing more of her than what she could give. The cabin still stood, quiet and weathered, its walls patched up where she'd once nursed a stranger back to life. And in the stillness of those mornings, she sometimes wondered if she had imagined him Daniel Roth, the man who had brought a storm into her quiet world and then left her to pick up the pieces. Weeks had passed since she walked out of his tower. She hadn't heard a word since, not a message, not a car, nothing. And that, she told herself, was the answer. He had returned to his world, she had returned to hers. The lines had been drawn, and she had walked away from his side with her dignity intact but her heart bruised in places she didn't have the words to name. But that morning, as the wind picked up and the first flakes began to fall again, she saw something that stopped her breath, a figure, standing at the foot of the trail, right where she had found him once before. No car, no suit, no entourage. Just a man in a wool coat, his shoes dusted in snow, his eyes fixed on her like he'd been walking toward this moment for a long time. It was Daniel. Her heart didn't race, it simply paused, as if trying to catch up with time. He took a slow step forward. I didn't know if you'd still come here. Lena stood still, her hands gripped the basket tight. Why are you here? He smiled gently, the kind of smile that didn't try to fix anything, only to say, I remember. Because I realized I left the only place I've ever felt human, he said, and I've been trying to get back ever since. She didn't move. But her voice softened. You're not supposed to be here. This isn't your world. I know, he said, but I was never meant to belong in the one I built. His eyes searched hers, not with power, not with charm, just something raw and honest. When I collapsed on this trail, he said slowly, I was running from my company, from my people, from who I had to pretend to be every single day. And when I woke up in that cabin, I thought I was dead, but you, his voice caught, you didn't treat me like a billionaire. You treated me like I was worth saving, and the truth is, no one has done that in a long, long time. Lena looked away, blinking fast. You don't owe me anything. I know, he said gently. That's why I'm here. She looked back at him, and for the first time she saw it, the weariness in his eyes. Not from money, not from fame, but from a life that had cost him too much. He took another step forward, then pulled something out from inside his coat. Her locket, the one that had slipped from her neck weeks ago when she stormed out of his office. I kept it, he said. Not because it was valuable, but because it reminded me of you, of what I lost the minute you walked away. Lena didn't speak. Her throat ached too much. I went back to the board, he continued, told them I was stepping down. They laughed at first. Then they panicked. I didn't care. I sold half my shares, gave up the penthouse, kept only what I needed. She stared at him, stunned. Why would you do that? He smiled, because I finally understood what I didn't need. I had all the money in the world, and none of the meaning. She took a shaky breath. So what now? Daniel looked around at the trees, the snow, the quiet place that had brought them together once by accident. Now, he said, now I want to build something different, something real, but I can't do it alone. He held out the locket. This isn't about rescuing you or repaying you. It's not about guilt or gratitude. It's about choice. I'm choosing you, Lena, not because I need saving, but because you made me want to live differently. Her hands trembled as she took the locket back. For a long moment she said nothing. Then finally quietly she asked, and what if I say no? He didn't flinch. Then I'll walk back down this mountain and never bother you again. I'll live with the grace you gave me, even if I never earn another moment of it. Silence fell again, thick as the snow, the kind of silence that tests you, that asks you to trust one more time, even when the world has given you every reason not to. Then Lena stepped forward, just one step, and in that step was everything she hadn't said. She didn't need a penthouse. She didn't need a necklace. She didn't need promises written on gold. She just needed to be seen. And this time she was. Daniel reached out, brushing a snowflake from her cheek. You didn't save a billionaire, he whispered. You saved a broken man. And this time he wasn't offering money. He was asking to stay.